I was still awake. That's the only reason I heard it. Through the thin wall of the den, their voices, low and conspiratorial, snaked into the quiet of my small bedroom. "The trust fund," Clara whispered, her tone edged with impatience. "It's almost depleted, and she's asking questions again." Marcus's voice, usually so smooth, was tight. "We'll handle it. She's getting slower, Eleanor, confused. It's for her own good. The Evergreen facility has a lovely memory care wing." My breath hitched. Memory care. For me. I sat up, rigid, on the edge of my bed, my hands clenching the worn cotton of my nightgown. My travel bag, a sturdy canvas one I'd used for weekend trips, was already tucked under the bed, half-packed. I'd started folding a few items after dinner, a strange, prickling premonition urging me to be ready, though for what, I hadn't known until this very moment. It had been 6 months since I'd moved into Clara and Marcus's sprawling suburban house. My little apartment, filled with the echoes of my late husband and the scent of old books from my antique shop, had become too much to manage after a nasty fall that left me with a fractured wrist and a lingering tremor. Clara, my only daughter, had insisted, "You'll be so much happier here, Mama. We'll take care of everything." I believed her. I sold the antique shop, a legacy passed down through 3 generations, and wired the substantial proceeds to an investment account Marcus assured me he'd manage with my best interests at heart. I didn't ask too many questions. I wanted to trust. I wanted to believe my own child loved me enough to make space for me, not just in her house, but in her life. But love, I'd learned, wasn't measured in the size of a guest room or the grandness of promises. It was in the small, quiet gestures, a refilled teacup, a patient ear, the gentle inquiry about your day. Tonight, I'd eaten alone at the kitchen island, Clara and Marcus having a late meeting in the den, leaving me with a reheated casserole. I didn't mind the solitude so much as the dismissive wave Clara had given me when I'd asked about her art exhibition, as if my very presence was an inconvenience, a disruption to her important life. I'd just finished rinsing my plate when they returned, their voices hushed, their steps careful, as they headed into the den. It was then, as I prepared for bed, my door ajar to let in the cool evening air, that I heard it. The words, the plan. "She's getting slower," Clara repeated, and she mentioned the quarterly statement again. "We need to finalize the arrangements for Evergreen, quietly." I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, long after their footsteps had receded into their master bedroom. Then a strange calm settled over me. I moved quietly, methodically. I closed my door, locked it, and pulled the canvas bag from under the bed. No tears came. I hadn't cried easily in years, not since my husband passed. But my hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as I folded my favorite silk scarf, the one Clara had always said made me look too old for her sophisticated circles. I added my passport, my old address book, a small leather-bound journal, and the thick cream-colored brochure for the Evergreen Memory Care Residence I'd found last week in Marcus's desk drawer, innocently labeled Eleanor's Future Care. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 12:57 a.m. I had no destination in mind, just one overriding instinct: leave before their whisper became my cage. Outside, the cul-de-sac was eerily silent. The neighborhood, all manicured lawns and identical brick houses, felt alien. I didn't belong here. I never had. I opened the front door with a soft click, my worn walking shoes in one hand, my bag in the other. I left no note. What could I possibly write? Thank you for the hospitality, for the subtle erasure, for the plans to institutionalize me. I paused only once at the end of the long driveway, looking back at the imposing house where my name was no longer a welcome sound at the dinner table, where my future was being decided without my consent. Then I turned, stepped onto the quiet street, and walked toward whatever uncertain path lay ahead. The bag felt heavier with each step, not from its contents, but from the accumulated weight of years of polite dismissal, of being systematically diminished. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The bus stop was 3 blocks down, a small shelter under a sickly sycamore tree. I walked barefoot, my shoes still clutched in my hand, the pavement cool and damp from the night air. The silence pressed against my skin like a shroud. I passed 2 houses before a motion sensor light clicked on, bathing me in its harsh glow. For a fleeting second, I considered turning back, knocking on the door, fabricating a story about a bad dream, a misunderstanding. But I hadn't misunderstood. The words, memory care, depleted trust fund, for her own good, had been chillingly clear. And the silence that followed, Marcus's lack of protest, Clara's cold determination, had been even louder, a tacit agreement that sealed my fate. I sat on the cold metal bench, pulling my shoes on. The last bus to the city center was due in 10 minutes, according to the fated schedule. I hadn't taken public transport since before my fall, since before I'd surrendered the last vestiges of my independence, and moved into a house where I was a guest, an obligation, a problem to be solved. The street was deserted. A single porch light across the road blinked, but no one emerged. I zipped my light jacket higher, not for warmth. It was a mild late spring night, but for the illusion of being contained, held together. My hand instinctively went to the small inner pocket of my bag. I hadn't meant to find it. A week ago, searching for my reading glasses in Marcus's home office, I'd stumbled upon a thick manila envelope tucked behind a stack of tax documents. It was labeled simply, Eleanor Vance, Financials. Inside, copies of forms I barely recognized, a power of attorney, granting Marcus full control over my assets, my signature scrawled at the bottom, but it wasn't mine. Not quite. Close enough, though, for a quick glance, for a busy bank teller, for a notary who didn't ask too many questions. The loops were too perfect, the slant subtly off. A practiced imitation. I'd folded the documents back, my heart hammering, and returned the envelope to its hiding place. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying 1,000 small moments that now coalesced into a terrifying pattern. The insistent pressure to sell my shop quickly. Marcus's firm refusal to let me speak directly with the financial advisor. Clara's sudden, efficient management of my medications and appointments. The whisper I'd heard tonight wasn't the beginning of a plan. It was the final, chilling confirmation of a scheme that had been unfolding for months. The bus arrived, a lumbering metal beast hissing to a stop. I stood, pulled my bag behind me, and climbed aboard. The driver, a young woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at me. "Anywhere in particular?" she asked, her voice flat. "Just downtown," I said, "near the old market square." She nodded. "Late night for that." I didn't answer. I watched the empty streets blur through the window, the rhythmic flash of streetlights mirroring the chaotic thoughts in my mind. Forgery, betrayal, a life being stolen. 20 minutes later, I stepped off the bus into a part of the city I hadn't visited in decades. The familiar old hotel I remembered was gone, replaced by a gleaming glass tower. I wandered, disoriented, until I found a modest motor lodge tucked between a brightly lit gas station and a 24-hour diner. The woman behind the counter, absorbed in a paperback, barely looked up when I requested a room. One night, she mumbled, sliding a key card across the counter. The room was small, clean enough, smelling faintly of bleach and something else, something older, more permanent. I locked the door behind me and set my bag on the single chair. Only then did I allow myself to exhale fully, a long, shaky breath. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Of course not. They hadn't noticed yet. Or perhaps they had, and simply hadn't bothered to inquire. The worst part wasn't the whisper, nor the forged signature, nor even the forced smiles. It was the crushing certainty that somewhere along the way I had ceased to be ELEANOR, mother, artist, shop owner. I had become an asset, a liability, a room that cost more than it gave, a burden. I lay back on the bed, fully dressed. I wasn't afraid, not yet. That would come later. Tonight, I was simply exhausted. But tomorrow, I would begin. Sleep didn't come easily. The motel sheets were stiff, and the distant hum of the ice machine sounded like a train, ceaseless, relentless. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the textured ceiling, replaying every interaction, every subtle slight. Clara's dismissive tone, Marcus's overly solicitous questions, the brochure for Evergreen. I'd never intended to be a burden. I'd moved in hoping to contribute, to help with the twins, to perhaps rekindle a closeness with Clara that had frayed over the years. But the twins were always busy, always scheduled, and perhaps I was simply too old to be interesting. It started with small things. My antique writing desk, a cherished piece, moved to the garage. My favorite ceramic mug replaced with a delicate, handleless one that burned my fingers. Clara rearranged the kitchen, declaring it more efficient, though I could never find the cinnamon. Marcus would always say it was for my comfort, but it always felt like I was being managed, not cared for. I rose before the first hint of dawn and made tea with the motel's rusty little kettle. It tasted metallic, but it was hot, and I needed something to anchor myself. The quiet in this room was different from the quiet in their house. There, it had been a watchful silence, waiting to correct me if I lingered too long at the table or turned the television up too loud. Here, it was simply stillness, no judgment, just absence. I opened my bag to change and paused again at the manila envelope. I hadn't dared look at it again last night. The mere knowledge of its existence had been enough to steal my breath. But this morning, I needed to see it. I needed to understand the full extent of what they had taken. The papers were neatly clipped, copies, not originals. Perhaps they'd been intended for shredding, or Clara had simply forgotten she'd tucked them into Marcus's drawer. There were 3 main documents. The first was a general power of attorney authorizing Marcus to act on my behalf in all financial and legal matters, including banking, property, and medical decisions. Signed in my name, witnessed, even notarized. The signature was good, almost perfect. I'd seen it before, on birthday cards Clara had signed from all of us when Marcus was too busy. The same precise flourish on the E, the same forced neatness. The second document was a transaction history from Marcus's personal investment account. Multiple transfers from an account linked to the sale of my antique shop. Over $200,000 gone in 6 months. Not a single call to ask if I needed anything. Not a word of explanation. The third was a draft application for the Evergreen Memory Care residence. My name typed neatly at the top. Age, medical conditions, mobility notes. One line stood out, bolded. Patient demonstrates early signs of cognitive decline. That's what Clara had said last week when I couldn't find my reading glasses. Maybe it's time to get your memory checked, Mama. She'd said it with a sweet, patronizing smile, a hand on my shoulder. I'd laughed, thinking it was a joke. Apparently, it wasn't. I folded the papers back slowly. My hands were steady now. I was done being shocked, done giving the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want revenge, not truly. What I wanted was mine, my name, my choices, my voice. I had spent decades raising a girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who cried the first time her pet hamster died. I didn't know when that girl became a woman who saw me as disposable, but I wasn't going to beg for her affection anymore. Some things, once broken, don't mend. At 8 a.m., I called a cab. The driver was young, polite, didn't ask questions when I said, "Take me to Fidelity Bank, downtown branch." I sat in the back, clutching my bag like a lifeline. It was the same bank where Marcus used to bring me to sign documents. He always insisted on speaking to the tellers, saying he explained things better. The woman at the front desk had a name tag that read, Maria. She smiled, then her expression faltered when she saw my face. "I'd like to speak with a manager," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's regarding power of attorney and financial oversight." She nodded quickly and disappeared down a hallway. A few minutes later, a man in a crisp navy suit appeared, mid-40s, clean-shaven, with kind, weary eyes. "Mrs. Vance," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Mr. Davies. Please come to my office." Inside, I handed him the envelope. I didn't explain, just waited while he flipped through the pages. After a long, heavy silence, he looked up. "Did you sign this power of attorney, Mrs. Vance?" "No." "Do you recall authorizing these transfers?" "No." "Has anyone accessed your accounts on your behalf recently?" "My daughter, Clara Thorne, and her husband, Marcus Thorne." He nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Vance, this is extremely serious. Forging a signature on a legal document is a felony, and if these funds were moved without your knowledge, we will need to open an internal investigation." "I'm not here to press charges," I said. "Not yet. I'm here to stop everything right now." Mr. Davies leaned forward. "You want to revoke this power of attorney?" "Yes, today, and freeze any access they have to my accounts. Everything. Cancel automatic payments. Shut down shared access." I took a breath. I hadn't decided this part until that very moment, but suddenly it was crystal clear. "And I'd like to move the remaining funds to a new account in my name only. I'll need help setting up secure access, and eventually I want to transfer control to someone else, but not my daughter or son-in-law." Mr. Davies nodded. "We can absolutely do that, Mrs. Vance." We spent the next hour reviewing everything. Every payment Marcus had authorized, every form Clara had notarized through a friend. It wasn't just theft, it was an erasure, quiet, polite, systematic. By the time I left the bank, it was almost noon. My feet ached, my back protested, but I stood taller. This was the first day in months I truly belonged to myself. I stepped out of the bank into the thin, crisp air of mid-morning. The city had begun to stir in full, cars honking, people brushing past each other with paper cups and phones pressed to their ears. I stood still for a moment, holding my coat closed at the collar, unsure what to do next. I hadn't thought this far ahead. I hadn't thought beyond the bus bench, the motel room, and the kind man at the bank who had told me, gently but firmly, that what had been done to me wasn't just unkind, it was illegal. But legal or not, what do you do when your own child looks at you and sees only liability? I walked for blocks, slowly, until I found a bench tucked under an old oak tree across from a public park. I sat, my bag beside me, and rested my hands in my lap. The envelope was there, folded neatly, but I didn't need to look at it again. I could see every word burned behind my eyes. I didn't feel sad. That would come later, perhaps. What I felt was a hollow sort of clarity, the kind you get when the noise dies down, and all that's left is the truth. It wasn't about the money. It was about being erased, about the way Clara would smile and correct me when I told a story at dinner, about how Marcus started talking about assisted living facilities within a week of me moving in, about how my bedroom door didn't lock, about how my mail began arriving already opened, about how I hadn't received a birthday card from my granddaughter, Lily, in 2 years, not even a call. They thought I was fading, easy to move, easy to silence, and maybe I had started to believe that too until last night. A gust of wind pushed fallen leaves across the sidewalk. I pulled my jacket tighter. I hadn't brought enough for cold weather. I hadn't thought I'd be outside for more than a day. I wasn't sure if I had a place to go now, but I had control again. That was more than I'd had in months. A young mother with a stroller walked past me. She glanced at me, then looked away. I wasn't offended. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to sit in this strange, empty quiet and figure out what came next. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second, I didn't move, just stared straight ahead. Then I pulled it out. The screen lit up with Clara's name. I let it ring until it stopped. Then came the message. "Mama, where are you? Please call me. We're worried sick." I didn't answer. I didn't owe her that. A few minutes later, another message appeared, this time from Marcus. "We woke up and your room was empty. This is truly upsetting. You're scaring Lily." I stared at that one longer. Lily scared? She hadn't said 10 words to me in the last month. She avoided me in the hallway like I was a bad omen. And now she was scared? No, Marcus was scared. Scared that his nice little scheme was crumbling. Scared that the old woman he meant to institutionalize had slipped out the front door with a bag and a secret. Good. Let him be scared. I closed the messages without responding. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew who I needed to see. There was a name on a card, Mr. Davies, the bank manager had given me. A lawyer. Someone who could walk me through the rest of the process. Someone who could help me make sure this wouldn't happen again. Her office was 6 blocks away. I stood up, stretched the ache from my back, and pulled my bag along behind me. It rolled noisily over the cracked pavement. The receptionist was young, with a soft voice. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but Mr. Davies from Fidelity Bank told me to come." She nodded and disappeared through a side door. A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s came out. Tailored jacket, soft gray eyes, not much makeup. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Vance, I'm Ms. Anya Sharma. Mr. Davies called. Come with me." We sat in a private office with tall bookshelves and heavy curtains. I opened the envelope one more time. Anya read through everything slowly, her eyes narrowing. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance. This happens more often than people think, especially to older women who trust too easily." "I didn't think I was being naive," I said quietly, "just hopeful." "You weren't naive," she said. "You were loving, and they took advantage." We spent nearly 2 hours together. She explained my rights, what the forged documents meant legally, what actions could be taken. She used words like fraud, financial exploitation, elder abuse. I nodded through them, though they sounded like someone else's life. I wasn't ready to talk about court. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I did want protection. "I want a new will," I said. "I want everything rewritten." She didn't blink. We can do that. And I want to transfer financial power to someone else, not my daughter or son-in-law. Do you have someone in mind? I thought of Beatrice, an old friend from my antique shop days. Kind, reliable. She'd sent cards every Christmas, even when I didn't reply. She'd visited after my fall, brought homemade cookies and gentle conversation, and never asked about money. Yes, I said. Beatrice Hayes. I'll call her. Anya began drafting documents while I sat there, sipping the lukewarm tea her assistant brought in. Her office was warm and smelled faintly of cedar. For the first time since the motel room, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but footing. I was still standing. When I left her office, my phone had 5 missed calls, all from Clara and Marcus, and 1 voicemail. I didn't listen. Instead, I turned the phone off. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence for once. Let them feel what it's like to wait for a call that never comes. The sun had started its slow descent by the time I stepped out of Anya's office. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, blinking at the soft light. My bag rolled behind me like a tired companion. I hadn't eaten all day, but I wasn't hungry. There was something sharper in my stomach. Not pain, not quite fear. Something like readiness. I found a bench near the train station and sat down. I wasn't sure where I would sleep that night. The motel was an option, but part of me didn't want to go back there. I needed something else, something unfamiliar, a small act of defiance, perhaps, a reminder that I could still choose. I opened my bag to look for a scarf and felt the edge of the manila envelope again. My hand brushed the contents I already knew by heart, the forged power of attorney, the bank transfers, the draft admission forms to Evergreen. But there was something else tucked behind them, a second envelope, sealed, heavier. I didn't remember packing it. It must have been there by accident, or perhaps Marcus had left it in his drawer without realizing. I opened it slowly. Inside, more forms, property records, loan applications. One was a refinance agreement on my old antique shop building, dated just 2 weeks after I'd moved in with Clara and Marcus. I stared at it, then looked closer. The building hadn't been sold once. It had been sold twice. Marcus had forged a second transfer using my name to take out equity after the initial sale. They'd claimed I was still the legal owner, used that as leverage to pull another loan against it. But the worst part was the note paperclipped to the back in Clara's precise, narrow handwriting. Make sure she doesn't see mail from Harbor Front Realty. Redirect notices starting next week. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd planned to drain every last trace of my life before handing me over to a facility and walking away clean. I folded the paper slowly, my hands steady. So that was the plan. Sell the shop, take the money, forge the signature, refinance again, institutionalize me, smile for holiday photos, let the doctors blame it on age. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I was angry. Not the loud kind, not the messy kind. The kind that sits low in the belly and waits, that sharpens itself on silence and time. I sat there on that bench for a long time, watching people move through the world. Some laughing, some rushing, none of them knowing what it meant to vanish piece by piece inside your own family. They'd tried to turn me into a shadow, but I'd remembered who I was. And tomorrow I'd remind them too. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I walked until my legs ached, then checked into a modest bed and breakfast a few blocks from the courthouse. The woman at the desk didn't ask questions, just handed me a key and pointed down the hall. The room was small but warm, a patchwork quilt on the bed, a lamp with a crack in the ceramic base. It felt like a place where someone could rest and still feel real. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no footsteps outside my door, no whispers. In the morning, I got dressed, tied my scarf, and called the bank. Mr. Davies answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice already tense, "I was going to call you. We flagged several more transactions. One of them was attempted just this morning, a transfer of $15,000 to a private contractor. The account was Marcus's. The authorization came from a joint account that listed you as co-owner. I want it blocked," I said calmly. "We already froze it," he replied. "But he may try again. He's likely going to notice soon. I assume he already has." There was a pause. "Do you want to report it formally? I can refer you to our fraud unit." "Not yet," I said, "but keep everything stopped. Every transfer, every link, everything with my name on it. I want full access moved to my new account and nothing else touched." "Yes, ma'am." I could hear him typing in the background. "Also," I said, "I want to see a printout." Everything Marcus or Clara touched, every withdrawal, every transfer, all of it. "We'll prepare the full report," he said. "It'll be ready for pickup this afternoon." After I hung up, I sat quietly on the edge of the bed, staring at the curtain fluttering in the breeze. I thought about my antique shop building, the one they'd sold and resold like it meant nothing. I thought about the little garden I'd tended for 30 years behind it, the climbing roses I planted after my husband died, gone now, covered in concrete and profit. And yet, somehow I didn't feel broken. I felt sharp, sharper than I had in years. By 10 o'clock, I was back at the bank. Mr. Davies handed me the folder himself, his face grim. "This is everything from the last 18 months, he said. "The amount moved is significant." I sat down in the small private room, opened the folder, and began reading. Page after page, withdrawals labeled business expenses, but I hadn't owned a business in months. Medical supplies, but I'd never seen those specialists. Investment transfers into Marcus's name, always temporary, he'd told the clerk, just moving funds around for tax strategy. And the worst, automatic transfers. A slow bleed of $800 here, $500 there, set to hit monthly for subscriptions, insurance policies, a cleaning service, a landscaping company. I had been paying for the house I no longer owned, for their groceries, for their lavish vacations. One line made my hand go cold. Tuition, Hawthorne Preparatory, annual. I stared at it. That was Clara's niece's school. Not even immediate family, just someone they wanted to impress. I turned back to Mr. Davies. "I want all of this stopped," I said. "It's already done," he assured me. "But you need to understand, this qualifies as financial exploitation if you change your mind about legal steps." "I'll handle that part separately," I said. He nodded. "Would you like help setting up alerts so you can see every transaction going forward?" "Yes, and I want physical statements mailed to my new address. No online access, no sharing, no digital trail." "Understood." He left me in the room for a few minutes while he finalized the changes. When he returned, he had a card in his hand. "One more thing," he said. "There's a support organization for older adults who've gone through situations like this. They help with housing, legal aid, emotional support. It's confidential. You don't have to." I took the card before he could finish. "Thank you," I said. "I might call." That afternoon I did, not because I needed a therapist or a place to cry, but because I needed a witness, someone to say, "Yes, this happened," and "No, You weren't crazy." The woman who answered, her name was Brenda, spoke gently, but not with pity. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "You're not alone." And I believed her. Brenda met me the next morning at a small community center tucked between a church and a grocery store. Nothing fancy, just a clean front desk, quiet hallways, and the smell of coffee drifting in from a side room. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and soft eyes that didn't blink away from pain. "You must be Eleanor," she said, shaking my hand. "Come on back. We'll get started." Her office was simple: 2 chairs, a desk, and a bookshelf with pamphlets about elder rights, fraud prevention, long-term care. I didn't look at the titles. I was tired of reading about people like me. "I don't want therapy," I said before she could start. "And I'm not here to vent. I've done what I needed at the bank. I just want to make sure no one ever puts me in this position again." Brenda nodded without offense. "That's exactly what we'll do." She opened a folder and pulled out a short form. "I'll take down some background, and then I'll connect you with one of our legal partners. No cost to you. And if you need safe housing, we can help arrange that too. Transitional stays, independent units for women who've been displaced." "I'm not displaced," I said. "I left." She smiled gently. "That's even better." We talked for a while. I answered her questions, filled out a few forms. Then she picked up the phone and dialed someone named Anya. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Anya Sharma again, in a new context, with sharp glasses perched on her nose and a quiet, focused intensity. "Tell me what you want, Eleanor," Anya said. "Not what happened, just what you need moving forward." It was the first time anyone had asked me that without condescension. "I want a new will," I said. "Everything rewritten, my daughter and son-in-law removed entirely. I don't want them to receive a cent, not even by mistake. Done. I want my financial power of attorney reassigned to someone I trust, someone who will act only with my written permission. Do you have someone in mind?" "My friend, Beatrice Hayes," I said. "Good. We'll send the forms to her for co-signing." "I also want a living will," I added, "and a medical directive. No one should be able to make decisions about my care but me, unless I've specifically named them." Anya looked at me for a long moment, then nodded again. "You're the kind of client we don't see often," she said. "Most women come to us in pieces. You came already whole, bruised, but whole." I didn't answer. I wasn't here to be praised. I just wanted it all clean, signed, filed. Over the next hour, we went through the details, the accounts, the property, the list of assets still in my name. She explained how the second mortgage Marcus had taken out could be challenged, since it had been done with forged signatures. But I would need to decide whether I wanted to press charges or simply sever the ties. I chose the second for now. "I don't want their money," I said. "I want mine. I want my name back. I want silence from them." "That," Anya said, "I can help with." By the time we finished, the sun was already low. She handed me a folder, a new one, clean and labeled with my name in her precise handwriting. "Everything will be official by the end of the week," she said. "Until then, no one can touch anything. And if they try, you call me." I stepped outside, holding the folder like it was made of glass. Everything I had built, every quiet step, every careful boundary, was now real. I wasn't afraid of CLARA anymore. I wasn't afraid of Marcus's manipulations, or forged papers, or empty threats. They could scream, they could beg, they could send flowers and messages and voicemails. It wouldn't matter. Their access was gone. and I was no longer the woman who waited in her room to be told what came next. I was deciding now, and they would live with that. I hadn't called Beatrice in over a decade. We used to talk weekly, back when our husbands were still alive, and our children were young enough to worry us, but not disappoint us. She moved to the coast after her husband passed, said the sea air was easier there. I sent her a card that Christmas, and she sent back a short note. Then nothing. Life had drifted us apart like leaves on different rivers. But that afternoon, as I sat alone in the bed and breakfast with the folder from Anya in my lap, I dialed her number from memory. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? I knew her voice immediately. It was lower now, slower, but it still carried that old edge, like she'd always just finished telling someone off. Beatrice, I said, my voice breaking just a little. It's Eleanor. A pause, and then, Eleanor Vance? Lord have mercy, where have you been? I left, I said, left Clara's house. I needed to disappear just for a bit. Another pause, this one different, not surprise, something more careful. Is everything all right? No, I said honestly, but I think it will be. She didn't ask questions, just said, You have somewhere to sleep tonight? Tonight, yes. Tomorrow, I don't know. You do now. I'm still in Oceanside, got an extra bedroom, the one with the floral wallpaper you always hated. Come stay. I'm not asking. I'm telling. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Thank you. Pack your things, she said. I'll have clam chowder waiting. The bus ride to Oceanside took 3 hours. I dozed through half of it, the folder clutched to my chest, like a passport to a new life. When I got off, Beatrice was already waiting at the station, shorter than I remembered, but her eyes as sharp as ever. She didn't hug me right away, just looked at me hard. You're thinner, she said, and tired. Come on, we'll talk over tea. Her house was small but filled with life. Photos everywhere, old jazz records in the corner, a tabby cat that hissed at my bag, then disappeared under the couch. She made clam chowder like she always had, rich and creamy, no apologies. When we finally sat at the kitchen table, she poured 2 mugs of herbal tea and waited. I told her everything, from the moment I moved in with Clara, to the forged papers, to the whisper in the den. I told her about the bank, the lawyer, the second envelope. She didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, she leaned back, folding her arms. Damn. I smiled despite myself. And here I thought my son-in-law was the king of manipulation, she added. Yours sounds like he could teach a course. It's not just him, I said. Clara let it happen. She watched it happen. That's what breaks me. Beatrice nodded. Oh, honey, we raise them to stand tall, and they grow up thinking we're the floor. That silence settled in again. Not awkward, not sad, just full of all the things we both had lived and never said aloud. You're staying as long as you need, she said. I mean it, and if you want quiet, I'll give you quiet. If you want to scream into the sea, I'll hold your coat. I laughed, a real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. That night, she gave me the room with the floral wallpaper after all. And as I lay in bed, listening to the waves through the cracked window, I felt something unfamiliar return to my chest. Not safety, not yet, but something close. The phone started ringing just after 8 the next morning. I let it vibrate once, then turned it face down on the nightstand and walked out to the sunroom, where Beatrice was already sitting with her tea and a wool shawl draped around her shoulders. Let me guess, she said without looking at me. Your ghost just realized it's missing. I didn't answer. I sat beside her, wrapping my hands around a warm mug she'd left for me. The ocean was calm that morning, the air salted and damp. My bag sat untouched in the corner of the guest room, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to unpack or plan. I just existed. The phone rang again, then again, 6 times in the next hour. All Clara. No voicemail, just the name flashing over and over, as if urgency could erase what she'd done. "She's not worried about you," Beatrice said. "She's worried about whatever access you've taken with you." I nodded. I already knew. Later that morning, I turned the phone to silent. Messages began to stack, one by one. "Mama, please call me. We're worried. Where are you? Marcus is panicking. I need to talk to you right now. This has gone too far." I watched them appear without feeling much, each word read like a script. I could already hear her voice, tense, controlled, maybe even a little hurt, as if I'd betrayed her. I didn't reply. Instead, I went into the kitchen and helped Beatrice chop vegetables for lunch. Between the soft thuds of the knife and the hiss of boiling water, she asked, "Do you want to tell Lily what's happening about the legal papers?" "I will," I said, "when it's time, and the rest of them. I'm done talking to people who only listen when they need something." She nodded, dropping carrots into the pot. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't move. That afternoon, a new message appeared, this one from Marcus. "This is getting out of hand, Eleanor. If you don't return Clara's calls, we'll have to take other steps. You can't just disappear like this. People are asking questions." I reread it 3 times. That was his worry. Not me, not my health, not whether I was safe or scared or even alive. Just appearances. People were asking questions. I almost laughed. They had told themselves for so long that I was fading, slipping, losing control. And now they were the ones chasing ghosts, dialing silence. They could keep dialing. That night, I walked down to the beach with Beatrice. We didn't say much, just listened to the water and let the cold slip into our bones. "I never thought I'd be 65, I said finally, and still figuring out how to leave people behind." "That's how you know you're still alive," she said, "when you're still willing to walk away." Back at the house, I charged my phone and opened the messages again. 15 from Clara, 9 from Marcus, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I scrolled to the very bottom and saw one I hadn't noticed before, from an old contact I hadn't expected. "Grandma, it's Lily. Are you okay?" My granddaughter. I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off the phone again. Not because I didn't care, but because for once, I would answer on my own time. The letter arrived 2 days later, a real one, envelope, stamp, even Clara's handwriting on the front, in that perfect narrow script she used when she wanted to seem gracious. Beatrice brought it in from the mailbox, eyebrows raised. "You sure you want to open that?" she asked, handing it to me with a dish rag still in her hand. "I'm sure," I said. "I want to see how she spins it." I sat down at the kitchen table and slid it open with a butter knife. The paper was thick, expensive. Of course it was. "Eleanor," it began, "I hope you're safe and comfortable wherever you are. We've all been deeply concerned about you. Marcus hasn't been able to sleep. Lily is asking questions. We're trying to hold everything together in your absence. I won't pretend to understand why you left the way you did, or why you've refused to respond to our calls. I'm sure you have your reasons, though from where we sit, it feels disproportionate, unkind." I paused there. "Unkind," I said aloud, more to myself than to Beatrice. I read on. "We've always tried to support you in every way we could, opening our home, managing your affairs during your recovery. It hasn't been easy balancing everything, But we did it out of love, not obligation. I hope you haven't forgotten that. Now, however, things have become complicated. The accounts are locked. Services are disrupted. Marcus is being contacted by banks, by vendors, by people who don't understand what's going on. It's putting enormous pressure on the family. This isn't what anyone wanted. We're still willing to talk, to make things right. But we can't do that while you remain unreachable. You're part of this family, Eleanor, and families don't run away from each other. No signature, just her name, printed cleanly at the bottom. Clara. I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table, and sat back in my chair. Beatrice was watching me. "Well?" she asked. I shook my head. She's not even angry. That's the worst part. She still thinks she's the reasonable one. "They always do," Beatrice muttered, wiping her hands on her apron. It didn't hurt, not like I'd expected. Reading her words, so carefully chosen, so polite on the surface, was like seeing a costume on a hanger. There was no real shape behind it, just posture, performance. Unkind. That word stayed with me, as if I'd snapped at someone over dinner, as if I hadn't watched them siphon away the bones of my life bit by bit while smiling through it all. No apology, no admission, just concern over the consequences of getting caught. I pushed the letter aside and stood up. "Burn it?" Beatrice asked, already reaching for the matches. "No," I said. "Let it sit for a while. Let it feel ignored." The next morning, I wrote no reply. I made breakfast instead, washed the dishes, took a walk by the shore, let them talk, let them wonder. I wasn't part of that house anymore. Not their plans, not their polite lies. I had no more to say, and that finally was enough. I met her by accident. I was coming out of the local market with a bag of fresh produce when I saw her drop a stack of brochures in the parking lot, papers scattered in the wind like birds startled from a tree. She bent down, frustrated, chasing them with one hand while the other held her phone to her ear. I didn't think. I just moved. I set my bag on the curb and helped gather the pages, pressing them down under my hand until she could grab them. She looked up, out of breath. "Thank you, truly. Thank you." She was young, mid-30s maybe. Her jacket had a patch on the shoulder, Coastal Seniors Outreach. We stood up together. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled sheepishly. "I will be. I've got 3 home visits today. I'm behind and my printer broke this morning. But that's not your problem. Thank you again." She reached for the last page, glanced at my face, and paused. "Wait, are you Eleanor Vance?" I blinked. "Yes." Her smile softened. "I thought so. Brenda mentioned you from Elder Services." "That's right," I said carefully. "How do you know Brenda?" "I work with her sometimes. I'm a field coordinator. Housing and outreach mostly." She shifted the papers into one arm and held out her hand. "I'm Sophia." We shook. "I didn't expect to run into you here," she added. "I actually read your intake report last week. You're kind of famous in our office right now." I laughed despite myself. That's never a good sentence. "No, seriously. Most people in your position stay quiet. They let it happen. You didn't. You drew a line." "It was either that or vanish," I said. Sophia looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I probably shouldn't be mixing business and groceries," she said, "but I have a unit. Safe housing, 1 bedroom, no stairs, quiet building. It's usually reserved for emergency placements, but I think you qualify." I looked at the paper, then at her. "What's the catch?" "No catch. It's yours for up to 6 months. No rent, utilities covered. You'd have privacy, freedom, and strings?" She shook her head. "Just one. You check in with me once a week, not because I don't trust you, just so you're not alone." I didn't answer right away. I watched the wind move through the trees behind her, the way the sky had turned pale and wide, a place of my own, not borrowed, not conditional. I took the paper. "I'll think about it." "Of course," she said. "Take your time, but don't wait too long. Places like this don't stay open." 2 days later, I moved in. It wasn't fancy. Small kitchen, older carpet, a window that stuck when you opened it, but it was mine. I unpacked my bags slowly. No rush. Each folded sweater, each notebook, each pair of socks felt like it had earned the right to be there. Sophia came by the next morning with fresh towels and 2 mugs. "Just in case you want coffee with someone," she said, "or don't." We sat for a while. She didn't pry, just told me about her job, her dog, her aging mother who still tried to drive without glasses. I listened. I didn't talk much, but something about her rhythm calmed me. When she left, she said, "You don't owe anyone an answer, but you deserve to ask yourself what you want now, not what you'll tolerate, what you want." That night, I stood at the window in my new apartment. The lights outside were soft. No one was watching me. No one had access to my drawers or my name or my future. For the first time in years, I felt unclaimed, and I liked it. The community library was 6 blocks from the apartment Sophia helped me settle into, a low building with faded bricks and a crooked open sign in the front window. I found it one afternoon when I was walking without purpose, which I'd started doing often. There was something soothing about having nowhere to be and no one expecting you to explain why. Inside, it smelled like paper and dust and old polish, the kind of smell that reminded me of school libraries in the 60s, of waiting for my children to pick out a book while I watched the clock and thought about dinner. There were only 2 people at the front desk, a young man with headphones and sorting returns, and a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a frayed cardigan. She looked up as I wandered past the art history shelf. "You lost or just quiet?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. "Mostly." She nodded. "Same." Her name was George, a volunteer, just like I would become. It started simply. She was short-staffed on Tuesdays, and I liked the way she didn't treat me like I was fragile. I helped shelve the large print novels. Then I sorted donations. Then I started reading aloud on Thursdays for a small group, mostly women, some older than me, some younger. All of us held together by unspoken things. No one asked about my past. No one pried. And I didn't offer more than what I chose. I liked it that way. There was a rhythm to the days now. I'd wake early, open the blinds to the sound of gulls, make tea, and walk to the library with my scarf tied tight. Sometimes I stopped at the bakery across the street. Sometimes I just sat on the bench out front and listened. I didn't miss the house, not the one Clara sold, not the one Marcus filled with his rules. What I missed sometimes was the version of me who thought that family meant safety, that love was enough. But that version was gone now, and in her place was someone quieter but sharper, someone who had learned how to belong to herself. One afternoon, George handed me a stack of flyers. "Community talk next week," she said. "Elder advocacy. You should come." "I've had enough of talking," I said. "Not for you," she replied. "For them. You'd be surprised who listens when the right person stands up." I folded the flyer into my coat pocket. I wasn't sure I was ready to stand again, but the idea didn't scare me like it used to. Later that week, a woman came in with her grandson. She was probably near my age, dressed in clothes that looked borrowed and too large. She kept looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to come pull her back. I saw myself in her, or who I might have become had I not left when I did. She asked where the large print books were. I showed her. We didn't talk much, but as she turned to go, she said quietly, "You volunteer here?" "I do." She nodded once. "That's good. It means someone still sees you." I didn't answer, just smiled. That evening, I sat at my little kitchen table and thought about what Sophia said, about asking myself what I wanted, not just what I could endure. And what I wanted, maybe more than anything, was not to vanish, not into their house, not into their silence. I wanted to be useful, yes, but not necessary, seen, but not controlled, free, but not forgotten. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I was building a life where that was possible. It was a Wednesday, overcast, quiet. I was at the front desk helping George sort overdue slips when I looked up and saw her standing just inside the doors. Lily, my granddaughter. She was taller now, taller than I remembered, hair longer, shoulders sharper, still just a girl in some ways, but the kind of girl who was learning to carry things quietly. She wore a faded denim jacket, too thin for the season, and held nothing in her hands. I froze. George followed my gaze and leaned in. "Want me to send her off?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "Let's see if she came as herself or as their messenger." Lily spotted me and walked over, slow, uncertain. I stepped out from behind the desk. She stopped a few feet away. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I saw your name on the volunteer board online," she said, rubbing the back of her neck. "Didn't know where else to find you." I didn't ask how long it took her to work up the courage. I could see it on her face, the same expression Clara had when she was 14 and broke a neighbor's window, but told the truth anyway. "Do your parents know you're here?" I asked. "No. You tell them if you want to, but I'm not calling anyone." She nodded, looked down. "I didn't come to defend them," she said. "I don't even know everything they did, but I know you left, and I know it was bad. And I think—" She looked up again, eyes a little red. "I think I should have asked more before." "You were a child," I said. "It wasn't your job." "Still," she said, "you were always kind to me. I should have at least said goodbye." That did something to me, a small tear along a seam I thought I'd already stitched shut. "Would you like to sit?" I asked, gesturing to the reading chairs by the window. She nodded. We walked together in silence. She didn't touch her phone, didn't fidget, just lowered herself into the seat and waited. I sat across from her. We looked at each other for a long time. "You were the only one who remembered my birthday last year," she said. "You sent that little ceramic bird. I never told anyone, but I still have it. It sits on my desk." "That's good," I said. "They told me you were tired, that you needed space, that you were confused sometimes." Her voice cracked slightly at the last word. I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. She looked at her hands. "I don't know how much they took or what they did, but I know how they talk when they think no one's listening. And I remember how you looked at dinner sometimes, like you were underwater." That was the truest thing anyone had said to me in months. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't try to fix it. She just sat there, awkward and sad and real. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know I still think about you, and I'm sorry if I didn't show it sooner." I reached across the table, not quickly, and laid my hand gently over hers. She let it stay. We didn't speak for several minutes. Then I said, "You don't have to choose sides, Lily. You just have to choose what kind of person you want to be." She looked at me, and I saw her face shift, not into guilt, not into shame, but into something closer to understanding. "I'm trying," she said. "I believe you." Eventually she stood. I didn't walk her out. We'd said what we could, but just before she reached the door, she turned back. "Can I come again, just to visit?" "Yes," I said, "if you come as yourself." She nodded. Then she left. I sat back down, the afternoon light slanting across the room, and for the first time since I'd walked out of that house in the middle of the night, I felt something open in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The letter came in a white envelope with a firm black logo in the top corner. Sterling and Associates, LLP. No return address, just the name. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, sat by the window with the envelope on the table in front of me, like it might start talking if I looked at it too long. But it stayed quiet. Letters like that always are. The real noise comes after. I opened it with a butter knife. No rush, no shaking hands. The letter inside was 5 paragraphs long, neatly formatted, signed in blue ink. "Dear Mrs. Vance, we are writing on behalf of our clients, Ms. Clara Thorne and Mr. Marcus Thorne, regarding recent actions taken involving shared financial accounts, property, and legal responsibilities. Our clients have expressed concern over the abrupt nature of your departure, your decision to block account access without prior notice, and the potential legal ramifications of these actions. They are particularly troubled by the absence of communication and the emotional distress these changes have caused to the family, including minor dependents." I stopped there. "Minor dependents," I said aloud. "They're 11 and 14, not orphans." I kept reading. "Our clients are open to resolving the situation amicably and suggest a mediated conversation with legal counsel present to discuss a path forward that is respectful to all parties. Should this invitation be declined, we may be forced to explore legal avenues to ensure proper accounting and access regarding shared financial and family matters. We trust that you will act in good faith and respond within 14 days of receipt of this letter." It ended without warmth, just a signature and a deadline. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and stood up. The tea had gone cold. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Anya in her office again. She read the letter silently, lips pressed together, pen tapping once against the folder on her desk. When she finished, she placed it down and looked at me. "You okay?" "I'm not surprised, no, but I'd hoped they'd at least pretend to apologize." I shrugged. "They did, in their own way. They're sorry I woke up." Anya didn't smile. She never did when the subject was Clara and Marcus. "This letter isn't a real threat," she said. "It's a push, an attempt to intimidate you into backing down, into giving them a seat at the table again. They don't get a seat anymore." "Good," she said, "because you have every legal right to protect your assets. Everything we've done is above board. If they want mediation, we can say no. If they pursue action, we respond formally. But I doubt they'll follow through. This is a bluff. They don't want court. They want silence." "Well," I said, leaning back, "they can have silence, just not on their terms." Anya pulled a form from the drawer and handed it to me. "Just in case," she said. "Statement of intent. If you want, I can file this with the court. Preemptive. Makes your current standing harder to challenge." I signed it without hesitation. No flinching. No looking for Clara's face in the air around me. She wasn't in the room anymore. Not in my thoughts. Not in my decisions. Anya slid the form into her file. "They're not used to the version of you who says no," she said. "I'm still getting used to her myself." "You're doing fine." As I left her office, I walked slower than usual, not from age, but from certainty. I was no longer acting from fear, no longer reacting. This was the part of the story where I had already left the house, already reclaimed my name, already built a room of my own. And now I was simply closing the doors behind me, letting them knock if they wanted, but I wasn't letting them in. The days are quieter now, not empty, just quiet in a way that feels earned. Mornings start with the same slow ritual: kettle on the stove, window cracked open to let in the cold, soft sounds of gulls or passing feet. Some days I walk to the library, some days I don't. No one asks me to justify either. I still see Sophia once a week. She brings muffins or paperwork. And we sit at my little table and talk about ordinary things: tenant meetings, her dog's ruined couch, the strange things people leave in the building laundry room. She never asks about Clara. She never brings up Marcus. That silence, too, feels like respect. Lily visits sometimes, never with warning, never too long. She brings a book or a pastry or nothing at all. We sit and read or talk or don't, and it's enough. The last time she came, she asked if I remembered the story I used to tell her about the girl who ran away and found a home in the forest. I always thought that was made up, she said. It was, I told her, but I didn't know then how much truth a made-up story can hold. Sometimes I think about writing things down, not for them, not even for Lily, just for myself. Not a memoir, God forbid, but something small, a quiet record, a way to say, I was here. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. I left when I needed to. Anya still checks in. She told me last week that Clara and Marcus haven't filed anything. Their lawyer's silence is louder than any letter they could send. I'm not waiting for another envelope. I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come. That was the old me, the version who thought love was proven by patience, by endurance, by staying even when it hurt. But I've learned that staying and disappearing can look the same from the outside, and I will not vanish again. There's power in refusal, not the loud kind, not the dramatic, door-slamming kind, but the still kind, the kind that says, you do not get to define me anymore. You do not get to rewrite the story and leave me as a footnote. I don't hate them. I wish I did. Hate is clean, sharp. But what I feel is more like distance, the kind that no letter or lawyer or invitation to a holiday dinner can close. And that's all right. Some people lose you slowly. Others lose you all at once, in the middle of the night, with nothing but a bag and a folded envelope of truth. They don't always notice the moment it happens, but they always feel the absence. Beatrice calls from time to time. Her voice always cuts through the day like a familiar wind. She asks what I'm making for dinner, tells me about her blood pressure, about a neighbor who sings opera in the shower. We're old, Eleanor, she says, but God, we've earned it. I think about that a lot. What it means to age, not just in body, but in clarity. To choose peace over performance, to choose yourself, not in spite of anyone else, but for once without apology. I won't end this by telling you it all got better. That's not how life works. But I can tell you this. I am not afraid of the quiet anymore. I do not belong to those who tried to control me. And if you're reading this and it feels familiar, if something in you knows the sound of a locked drawer or a paper signed in your name, know this too. You are not too old to walk away, and they are not too powerful to stop you. You're allowed to leave, even if it's late, especially if it's late. And when you do, don't forget to leave the door open for yourself on the way out. You might be surprised who's waiting there. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever left quietly or wanted to, leave a comment below. you're not alone.